I used to believe that betrayal came with warning signs, a suspicious text message, a secret phone call, a lie that didn't quite make sense, something obvious, something noticeable, but I was wrong. The worst betrayals don't arrive like storms. They arrive like dust, quietly, slowly, so slowly that you don't realize they're settling over your life until everything you love is covered in it. And by then, it's already too late. My name is Emma Carter. I was 39 years old, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and for most of my life I considered myself lucky. Not rich. Not famous, not extraordinary, just lucky. Lucky enough to have a husband I loved, lucky enough to have a beautiful home, lucky enough to have a future I believed in, or at least. That's what I thought. If you had met me 2 years ago, you would have seen a woman with a stable marriage and a comfortable life. You would have seen someone who smiled easily. Someone who believed hard work always paid off. Someone who trusted the people closest to her, especially my husband, Ryan. For 13 years, Ryan had been my best friend, my partner, my safe place. The person I called when something wonderful happened. The person I leaned on when life became difficult. The person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. We met in college. He was charming without trying, funny without being arrogant, confident without being cruel, the kind of man who made everyone around him feel comfortable. When he proposed, I never hesitated. Not even for a second. I said yes before he finished asking, and for many years I never regretted that decision. Together, we built a life, not an extravagant life. Not the kind people post on social media to make strangers jealous, but a real life, a good life, the kind that felt solid, the kind that felt safe. Ryan worked as a financial consultant. I worked as a project manager for a healthcare company. We weren't wealthy, but we earned enough to live comfortably. And unlike many couples, we shared a common goal, a dream. We wanted to buy a lake house, not immediately, not next year, but eventually. A place where we could spend summers, a place where future grandchildren could visit. A place that belonged entirely to us. Every month, we contributed to a savings account dedicated to that dream. Every bonus, every tax refund, every extra dollar, it all went into that account. We called it our future fund. Sometimes we'd sit on the patio after dinner, drinking coffee and talking about what the lake house would look like. Ryan always wanted a dock. I wanted a wraparound porch. He wanted a fishing boat. I wanted giant windows facing the water. We laughed. We planned. We dreamed. And every conversation made me believe we were building something together. Something permanent. Something real. Looking back now, those memories hurt the most. Because none of them were fake. At least not for me. I meant every word. I believed every promise. I trusted every smile. And that's why what happened next nearly destroyed me. The first sign was so small I almost ignored it. One Saturday afternoon, Ryan and I were reviewing our monthly budget. Nothing unusual. We did it every month. I noticed a withdrawal from our savings account. $5,000. I frowned. "What's this?" Ryan glanced at the screen. "Oh," his answer came quickly, too quickly. "My sister needed temporary help." I blinked. $5,000, he shrugged casually. "She's struggling." I remember feeling uncomfortable. Not angry, just surprised. Because we usually discussed major financial decisions together, but I pushed the feeling aside. His sister, Amanda, had gone through a divorce recently. Maybe she really needed help. Maybe it wasn't a big deal, so I let it go. That was my first mistake. A few weeks later, another withdrawal appeared. $3,000, this time for his parents. Then another. Then another. Always an explanation, always a reason. Always someone in his family who supposedly needed help. At first, I wanted to be understanding. Families help each other. Life happens. Emergencies happen. But eventually, the pattern became impossible to ignore. One evening, I sat in the living room reviewing account statements. My stomach tightened. The numbers weren't adding up. The account should have contained significantly more money. Instead, the balance looked smaller every month. Much smaller. I grabbed a calculator. Then I started checking every transaction. One by one, line by line, and with every number I entered, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. By midnight, I had a total, nearly $40,000, gone, not spent on us, not invested. Not used for our dream, gone, transferred to members of Ryan's family. I stared at the screen. $40,000, years of saving, years of sacrifices, years of planning. I felt sick. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was missing something. Maybe Ryan simply forgot to tell me, but deep down, I already knew. The feeling sitting in my chest wasn't confusion, it was fear. The next morning, I confronted him. Carefully, calmly, I didn't want to fight, I wanted answers. "Ryan," I said softly, "we need to talk about the savings account." For a brief second, something flashed across his face. Not surprise, not confusion, panic. And then it disappeared, just as quickly as it came. "What about it?" I slid the statements across the kitchen table. The room suddenly felt colder. His eyes moved across the pages. Silence, a long silence. The kind that says more than words ever could. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "They needed help." I stared at him. $40,000. Their family. I felt my heart sink. "So am I," his jaw tightened. The conversation that followed lasted nearly 2 hours, and somehow, by the end of it, I felt worse than before. Because Ryan wasn't apologetic. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't even defensive. He seemed annoyed. Annoyed that I was asking questions. Annoyed that I wanted answers. Annoyed that I cared where our money had gone. That was the moment something changed inside me. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a tiny crack. A tiny fracture in the image I'd spent 13 years building. For the first time, I wondered if I really knew my husband. And what I didn't know then was that $40,000 wasn't the real betrayal. Not even close. The money was only the beginning. Because while I was focused on missing savings, a much darker secret was hiding right in front of me. A secret that would soon destroy my marriage, shatter an entire family, and force me to become someone I never imagined I could be. And the day I finally uncovered the truth, everything changed. After that conversation, I tried to convince myself that things could still be fixed. Maybe Ryan had made a mistake. Maybe he genuinely believed helping his family was the right thing to do. Maybe we could rebuild the trust that had started to crack. For a few days, I desperately held on to those possibilities. But the problem with lies is that they rarely stay buried. Once you start pulling on one thread, the entire fabric begins to unravel. And that's exactly what happened. The week after our argument, Ryan acted unusually attentive. He brought me flowers. He offered to cook dinner. He suggested a weekend getaway. At first, it seemed sweet. But the more he tried to distract me, the more suspicious I became. Because people who have nothing to hide don't usually work that hard to change the subject. One evening, I was sitting in our bedroom while Ryan showered downstairs. His laptop was resting on the desk near the window. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. But then a notification appeared on the screen. A banking alert. Just one quick pop-up. Most people would have ignored it. I couldn't, not anymore. My heart began pounding. I walked toward the desk. The screen was unlocked. And before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked the notification. What I found made my blood run cold. There wasn't one savings account. There were two. The account Ryan and I shared. And another account I had never seen before. An account that contained records going back almost 4 years. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The numbers didn't seem real. Transfer after transfer. Month after month. Thousands of dollars moving quietly between accounts. Some transactions led directly to his parents. Others went to Amanda. Some went to his younger brother, Tyler. There were even transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. The total amount made my stomach twist. Not $40,000, not $50,000, over $120,000. $120,000. I remember grabbing the edge of the desk because my legs suddenly felt weak. For years, I had believed we were saving for our future. For years, I thought every sacrifice mattered, every skipped vacation, every extra shift, every postponed dream. And all that time, Ryan had been quietly draining the account. Not once, not twice. Repeatedly, systematically, deliberately. The sound of the shower turning off downstairs snapped me back to reality. I quickly closed the laptop and sat on the bed. My heart was racing so hard I thought it might explode. A few minutes later, Ryan walked into the room smiling. "Everything okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had loved for 13 years, the man I had trusted with my entire life, and suddenly I felt like I was staring at a stranger. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Everything's fine." But nothing was fine, not anymore. That night I barely slept. Every memory felt different now, every promise, every conversation, every dream. I kept replaying the years in my head, searching for signs I had missed. And the worst part? There were so many, I just hadn't wanted to see them. Ryan's family had always depended on him. His parents constantly struggled financially. Amanda jumped from one crisis to another. Tyler never seemed able to keep a steady job. For years, I believed Ryan was simply supportive, generous, kind. Now I realized something else. He wasn't helping them occasionally. He was financing their entire lives, with our money, without my knowledge. The next morning, I called my best friend, Lauren. We had known each other since college. If anyone could help me think clearly, it was her. When I explained everything, she was silent for several seconds. Then she asked a question that stopped me cold. "Emma, are you sure the money is the only thing he's hiding?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" Lauren hesitated. Then she sighed. "People who can lie about one thing for years usually lie about other things too." I wanted to reject the idea immediately, but I couldn't. Because deep down, I had already started wondering the same thing. Over the following weeks, I became an investigator in my own marriage. I hated it. I hated every second of it, but I needed answers. I began documenting everything. Bank statements, emails, transfers, receipts, phone records, anything that looked suspicious. The deeper I dug, the uglier the picture became. Ryan hadn't simply been helping his family. He had been covering debts they never intended to repay, paying rent, making car payments, funding vacations. Even helping Amanda make a down payment on a house. A house. Meanwhile, we were still delaying our own dreams because we supposedly needed more savings. The hypocrisy made me physically ill. But then I discovered something even worse. One Friday afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I assumed it was spam, then I opened it. My entire body went numb. The message contained a screenshot, a family group chat, Ryan's family group chat, and what I read shattered whatever trust remained. One message from Amanda said, "Emma still thinks that Lake House is happening." Several laughing emojis followed. Another message from Tyler read, "As long as Ryan keeps moving money around, she'll never know." Then Ryan replied, 3 simple words, "Leave it alone." Not because it was wrong. Not because he felt guilty, not because he wanted to confess, but because he didn't want them discussing it. My hands were shaking. I could barely breathe. For years, they had all known. Every single one of them. They weren't grateful. They weren't embarrassed. They were mocking me, laughing at me, treating me like a fool. I sat in my car and cried harder than I had cried in years. Not because of the money, not because of the lies, but because of the humiliation. The realization that people I welcomed into my home had been secretly ridiculing me. The realization that my husband had allowed it, protected it, participated in it. That pain cut deeper than anything else. That evening, Ryan came home carrying takeout from my favorite restaurant. The gesture might have worked a month earlier. Now it felt almost insulting. He kissed my forehead, asked about my day, talked about work, acted completely normal. As if he hadn't spent years deceiving me, as if he hadn't helped his family steal our future, as if I didn't know. I sat across from him at the dinner table and listened. For the first time in my life, I realized how easy it was for him to lie, how natural it felt, how practiced he had become, and something inside me changed. The heartbreak was still there. The sadness was still there, but another emotion had begun taking its place. Resolve. I was done being the woman who trusted blindly. Done being the woman who ignored red flags. Done being the woman everyone thought they could manipulate, because now I had evidence. Now I had proof, and most importantly, I had patience. Ryan believed I was still confused, still emotional, still trying to save our marriage. He had no idea that I was quietly building a case against him, a case that would eventually expose every lie, every transfer, every betrayal, every person involved. And while his family continued laughing in their group chats, while they continued spending money that was never theirs, while they continued believing they had won, I was preparing for something they never saw coming, because the woman they thought was weak, the woman they thought was naive, the woman they thought they had fooled, was about to become their worst nightmare. And what happened next would change all of our lives forever. There's a moment in every betrayal story when the pain stops being the strongest emotion. For weeks, I thought heartbreak would destroy me. I thought the lies would keep me awake forever. I thought the humiliation would follow me for the rest of my life. But eventually, something unexpected happened. The sadness started turning into clarity, and clarity can be a very dangerous thing. Because once you see people for who they truly are, you can never unsee it. For 13 years, I had viewed Ryan through the lens of love. I made excuses for him. I defended him. I trusted him. But now that lens was gone, and what remained was the truth, a truth I should have seen years earlier, the truth that Ryan had never considered me his partner. Not really. A partner is someone you respect, someone whose opinions matter, someone who deserves honesty. Ryan had taken away all three and somehow expected me to keep smiling. The following Monday, I scheduled a meeting with a financial attorney. I didn't tell Ryan. I didn't tell anyone except Lauren. Walking into that office felt surreal. Part of me still couldn't believe this was my life. The attorney, a calm woman named Rebecca Collins, listened carefully as I explained everything. The hidden transfers, the secret account, the family group chat, the years of deception. When I finished, she sat quietly for several moments. Then she asked one question. "Do you have documentation?" I slid a thick folder across her desk. Every statement, every screenshot, every transfer, every piece of evidence. Rebecca opened the folder. The longer she read, the more serious her expression became. Finally, she looked up. "Emma, this is far worse than you realize." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She leaned forward. "Your husband wasn't simply helping family members." She pointed toward several transactions. "He intentionally concealed financial activity from a spouse." I stared at her. For months, I had focused on the emotional betrayal. Rebecca was looking at something else entirely. The legal side, the financial side, the consequences. And for the first time, I realized Ryan's actions might affect far more than our marriage. That evening, I sat alone in my car outside our house, the house that no longer felt like home. Lights glowed warmly through the windows. Ryan was inside, probably watching television, probably believing everything was under control, probably assuming I would eventually forgive him. The way I always had, but this time was different. This time I had stopped fighting for the marriage. Now I was fighting for myself, and those are two very different battles. Over the next several weeks, I became meticulous, careful, patient. Every document went into organized folders. Every suspicious transaction was recorded. Every message was backed up. I didn't confront Ryan, not yet, because I wanted the entire truth, not pieces of it, not excuses, everything. Then one afternoon, I discovered something that completely changed the situation. I was reviewing older bank records when I noticed recurring payments connected to a property address. At first, the address meant nothing to me, but curiosity got the better of me. I searched it online. The property appeared immediately, a small 3-bedroom home outside Raleigh. My heart stopped. The ownership records showed Amanda's name, Ryan's sister. I opened additional records, and that's when I realized where a huge portion of our missing money had gone. Ryan hadn't merely helped Amanda buy a house. He had practically purchased it for her. Using money from our savings, money intended for our future, money he promised would help us buy our dream lake house. I sat staring at the screen for almost 10 minutes, unable to move. Unable to think, unable to process the level of deception, every dream we postponed, every vacation we canceled, every sacrifice we made. Meanwhile, Amanda was living in a house financed by our future. The unfairness of it was overwhelming. But even then, I wasn't prepared for what came next. A few days later, Lauren called me. Her voice sounded strange, tense, concerned. "Emma," she said carefully, "I think you need to see something." An hour later, we met at a coffee shop downtown. Lauren handed me her phone. "What am I looking at?" "Watch." It was a social media video. Amanda's social media account. The video showed her standing in front of her house smiling, laughing, celebrating. Then she raised a glass and made a toast. Her exact words still echo in my memory. "Here's to family that always takes care of us." People laughed. Someone off camera said, "Especially Ryan." More laughter followed. Then Amanda replied, "He's basically our personal bank." Everyone laughed again, every single person. I felt physically sick, not because of the joke, because of the truth behind it. That wasn't how they viewed Ryan, and it certainly wasn't how they viewed me. To them, we weren't family. We were resources, a source of money, a source of convenience. A source of support they never intended to repay. For years, I had opened my home to these people, hosted holidays, bought gifts, cooked meals, helped whenever I could. And this was how they talked about us. I handed Lauren's phone back. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then she asked quietly, "What are you going to do?" I looked out the window, watching traffic move through the city, and for the first time, I knew the answer. "I'm done protecting him." A week later, Ryan's parents hosted a family barbecue. Normally, I would have declined. But this time, I accepted immediately. Because I wanted to see them, all of them, one more time. I wanted to look into their eyes and know exactly who I was dealing with. The gathering looked normal from the outside. Children running through the yard, music playing softly, food cooking on the grill, smiles everywhere. But once you know the truth, everything changes. The smiles looked fake. The conversations sounded hollow. The laughter felt calculated. And suddenly I noticed things I had ignored for years. The entitlement, the assumptions. The casual expectation that Ryan would always provide, that we would always provide. At one point, Amanda walked over holding a drink. She smiled, the same smile I had seen for years. But now I knew what existed behind it. "Emma," she said cheerfully, "you look tired." I smiled politely. "I've been busy," she nodded. "You should take a vacation." The irony nearly made me laugh. A vacation? With what money? The money they had already taken. The money they had spent. The money they joked about online. For the first time, I realized something important. These people weren't sorry. Not one of them. If given another opportunity, they would do it again, without hesitation, without guilt, without remorse. And that realization removed the final piece of doubt from my heart. That night, after returning home, I sat across from Ryan in our living room. The television flickered quietly. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he looked up. "You've seemed distant lately." I almost laughed. Distant. What an absurd word, as if emotional distance was the problem, not betrayal. Not deception, not stolen trust, distance. I looked at him carefully, studying his face, trying to find traces of the man I once loved, the man I married, the man I believed in. But all I saw was someone willing to sacrifice his wife to satisfy people who would never appreciate it. Someone who chose lies over honesty. Someone who believed he would never face consequences. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. I wasn't going to waste energy trying to change people who didn't want to change. Instead, I was going to expose everything, every transfer, every lie, every secret, every person involved. And when the truth finally came out, nobody would be able to hide from it, not Ryan. Not Amanda, not his parents, not anyone, because the revenge I was planning wasn't fueled by anger anymore. It was fueled by truth, and truth has a way of destroying every lie it touches. What none of them realized was that the storm was already coming, and they had no idea how much damage it was about to cause. People often imagine revenge as something explosive, a screaming match, a dramatic confrontation, a moment where years of anger finally burst into the open. But real revenge is usually much quieter. It's patient, calculated, precise. And when it's done correctly, the people who hurt you don't realize what's happening until it's already too late. That's exactly what I intended to do. By this point, I had spent nearly 3 months collecting evidence. Every transfer, every message, every financial record, every lie. I had enough documentation to fill multiple binders. And for the first time since discovering the truth, I no longer felt powerless. I felt prepared. Ryan still believed I was trying to save our marriage. He thought my silence meant forgiveness. He mistook my patience for weakness. That would prove to be his biggest mistake. The first step was protecting myself. At Rebecca's recommendation, I quietly opened new accounts in my name. I redirected my paycheck. I secured important documents. I made copies of everything: tax returns, property records, insurance information, retirement accounts, everything. I wasn't trying to hide assets. I was preparing for war. Because that's what divorce becomes when trust dies, a war fought with paperwork instead of weapons, and I intended to be ready. Every single step of the way. A few weeks later, Rebecca called me. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Emma, we found something." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Your husband has been moving larger amounts recently." I sat upright immediately. "What kind of amounts?" There was a pause, then she answered. "Large enough that it looks like he's trying to protect assets." The room suddenly felt smaller. Ryan knew, maybe not everything, but enough. Somehow he sensed that something was changing. And now he was moving money again, trying to stay ahead, trying to stay protected, trying to avoid consequences. But unlike before, he wasn't the only one watching. Now I had professionals tracking every move, and that changed everything. The following weekend, Ryan's family gathered again. Another barbecue, another smiling family photo, another performance. This time, however, I attended with completely different eyes. I wasn't there as a wife. I wasn't there as family. I was there as an observer, and what I saw confirmed every suspicion. Amanda showed up driving a luxury SUV she clearly couldn't afford. Tyler talked openly about a recent vacation. Ryan's parents discussed expensive home renovations. Meanwhile, everyone pretended financial struggles had forced them to seek help. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. At one point, I stepped onto the back patio alone. A few minutes later, Amanda joined me. For years, I had considered her a friend, a sister, someone I could trust. Now she felt like a stranger. She leaned against the railing and smiled. "You know," she said casually, "Ryan always takes care of family." I looked at her. "Does he?" She nodded. "That's just who he is." There was something smug in her voice, something arrogant. Something that made my skin crawl. For a moment, I wondered if she knew, if she somehow sensed what was coming. Then she added, "Some people are lucky to have someone willing to provide." I smiled politely, but inside I was done, completely done, because in that moment, Amanda unknowingly revealed the truth. She didn't view Ryan's generosity as a sacrifice. She viewed it as an entitlement, something she deserved, something she expected, and that attitude would soon become very expensive. A month later, Rebecca filed the paperwork, the divorce petition, the financial disclosures, everything. I still remember the morning Ryan was served. I wasn't home. I didn't want to be. Instead, I sat in a small cafe downtown, drinking coffee, watching rain slide down the windows, waiting. My phone rang around noon. "Ryan," I let it ring twice before answering. "Emma," his voice sounded shocked, panicked, confused. I said nothing. "What is this?" I took a slow breath. "You know exactly what it is." Silence, then anger. "You filed for divorce?" I stared out the window, at the rain, at the people hurrying through the streets, at the life continuing outside our disaster. "Yes." Another long silence followed. Then came the excuses, the explanations, the promises, the familiar performance. I was trying to help my family. You don't understand. I never meant to hurt you. We can fix this. Words. Just words. After years of lies, words meant nothing. What mattered now were actions, and his actions had already spoken loudly enough. The following weeks were chaos. Ryan called constantly, texted constantly, emailed constantly. Sometimes he begged, sometimes he blamed, sometimes he cried, sometimes he got angry. It changed daily, but one thing never changed. He never truly accepted responsibility. Even now, he wanted understanding, sympathy, forgiveness, anything except accountability, and that told me everything I needed to know. Then came the court proceedings, and that's when the real consequences began. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of undisclosed transfers, hidden accounts, documented deception, family involvement. Digital records, screenshots, financial statements, everything. One by one, the facts emerged. And one by one, the carefully constructed story Ryan had built began collapsing. The judge wasn't interested in emotional explanations. The facts spoke for themselves. Money had been moved. Information had been concealed. Trust had been violated. And there were records proving it. Lots of records. For the first time, Ryan looked genuinely afraid. Not embarrassed. Not frustrated. Afraid. Because the truth was no longer something he could manage privately. Now it existed in legal documents, court records, official evidence, and there was nowhere left to hide. The fallout spread quickly through his family. Amanda was furious. Tyler was furious. His parents were furious, but not at Ryan. At me. Apparently exposing the truth made me the villain. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. According to them, I was selfish, cruel, vindictive, unforgiving, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had stopped allowing them to benefit from my silence. And people who profit from your kindness often become angry when the profits disappear. One evening, Amanda called me directly. Her voice was shaking with rage. "How could you do this to Ryan?" I almost laughed. How could I, after everything? The question itself was unbelievable. I waited for her to finish. Then I calmly replied, "How could all of you do this to me?" Silence. For the first time in years, Amanda had no answer, because there wasn't one. There never had been. As the months passed, the family's world slowly began falling apart. Financial pressures increased, legal expenses mounted, relationships became strained, arguments erupted. People started blaming each other. The same family that once presented a united front suddenly looked very different when accountability arrived. Because loyalty built on money rarely survives when the money disappears, and theirs was disappearing fast. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not happy, not yet, but free. The constant confusion was gone. The self-doubt was gone. The questions were gone. I finally knew the truth. And truth, even painful truth, is easier to carry than lies. What Ryan and his family didn't realize was that the legal battle was only part of the consequences. The real punishment was still coming. Because once all the financial records became public, once every transfer was exposed, once every lie was revealed, the people who had spent years laughing behind my back would face something far worse than losing money. They would lose the one thing they valued most, their reputation, and when that happened, everything would change. People always talk about revenge as if it's a destination. As if you arrive there one day, watch the people who hurt you suffer, and suddenly everything feels better. But that's not how it works, at least not in my experience. Because by the time revenge finally arrived, I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing peace. And there is a difference, a very important difference. For nearly a year, my life had revolved around betrayal, evidence, lawyers, court hearings, financial records, endless reminders of everything Ryan had done, everything his family had done, everything I had lost. There were days when I felt exhausted beyond words, days when I wanted to disappear, days when I questioned whether fighting was worth it. But every time doubt appeared, I reminded myself of one thing. I wasn't the person who created this situation. I wasn't the person who lied. I wasn't the person who stole trust. I wasn't the person who chose deception over honesty. Ryan had made those choices, and now he would have to live with them. The final court hearing arrived on a cold morning in February. The sky above Charlotte was gray. Heavy clouds hung low over the city, the kind of weather that feels symbolic, like the world understands something important is about to happen. I sat quietly beside Rebecca. Years earlier, I would have been terrified. Now I felt strangely calm, not because I wasn't nervous, but because the truth was finally going to speak for itself. Across the room sat Ryan. For a brief moment, our eyes met. And what I saw shocked me. He looked older, much older. The confident man I married seemed gone. His shoulders sagged. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. The stress had finally caught up with him. For the first time, I realized something. The consequences had already begun long before this hearing. They had begun the moment his lies started unraveling. Over the next several hours, evidence was presented. Financial records, transfer histories, account statements, messages, screenshots, documents. Years of hidden activity laid out in black and white. The facts were impossible to dispute. No emotional story could change them. No excuse could erase them. No amount of blame could hide them. The truth was finally visible, and everyone in that courtroom could see it, including Ryan. When the proceedings ended, the outcome was clear. The financial misconduct had been documented. Assets were divided accordingly. Certain transactions received additional scrutiny. Several funds connected to family transfers became major issues. The consequences weren't dramatic in a Hollywood sense. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was dragged away. But real-life consequences are often far more painful because they don't end in a single day. They continue, month after month, year after year, a reminder that choices have costs, and Ryan was about to learn exactly how expensive those choices had become. The fallout hit his family almost immediately. Amanda struggled first. Without Ryan quietly funding her lifestyle, reality arrived quickly. The house she proudly celebrated online became a burden. The expenses she once ignored suddenly mattered. The confidence she displayed on social media disappeared. Then Tyler's problems surfaced. Without constant financial support, many of his bad decisions finally caught up with him. Debt, missed payments, financial pressure, the same issues Ryan had spent years covering. One by one, the safety nets vanished, and suddenly everyone was forced to stand on their own. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, what happened next surprised me. Not because it was unexpected, because it was predictable. The family started blaming each other. The same people who once presented themselves as loyal became divided almost overnight. Arguments erupted, relationships fractured, old resentments surfaced, secrets emerged. The unity they always bragged about turned out to be fragile because it wasn't built on love. It was built on dependency, and dependency rarely survives hardship. One afternoon, several months after the divorce became official, I received a message from Amanda. I stared at it for several minutes before opening it. Part of me expected another accusation, another attempt to shift blame, another excuse. Instead, the message was surprisingly short. I never thought things would end like this. That was all. No apology, no accountability, no acknowledgement of the damage, just regret about the outcome. I looked at the screen. Then I deleted the message. Some conversations no longer deserve a response, and some chapters deserve to stay closed. Forever. Around that same time, I learned something else. Ryan had moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing luxurious, nothing impressive, just a quiet place where he could start over. For a long time, I imagined how I would feel hearing news like that. Victorious, satisfied, happy. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Nothing, no anger, no excitement, no joy, just acceptance. Because the truth was simple. Ryan was no longer my problem, and that realization felt better than any revenge ever could. As for me, my life slowly began changing, not overnight. Healing never happens overnight, But little by little, things improved. I traveled more, spent time with friends, rediscovered hobbies I had abandoned years earlier, learned how to enjoy my own company again. Most importantly, I stopped defining myself by what happened. For too long, I had been the woman who was betrayed. Eventually, I became something else. A woman who survived. A woman who rebuilt. A woman who refused to let someone else's choices determine her future. Nearly 2 years after the divorce, something happened that once felt impossible. I bought property near a lake, not the massive dream house Ryan and I used to imagine, not the fantasy we spent years discussing, something smaller, something simpler. Something that belonged entirely to me. The first evening I stood on the dock, watching the sunset reflect across the water, I felt tears fill my eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of gratitude. Because I finally understood something. The dream hadn't died. Only the people attached to it had changed, and somehow that made the dream even more meaningful. That evening I sat alone watching the sky turn orange and gold. The lake was calm, the air was cool, the world felt peaceful. For the first time in years, there was no court date waiting. No evidence to gather, no lies to uncover, no betrayal to process, just silence, beautiful silence, the kind of silence that only comes after a storm has finally passed. And in that moment, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the secrets, the humiliation, the heartbreak, the anger, the revenge, the justice, all of it. And I realized something important. The greatest revenge was never making Ryan pay. The greatest revenge was proving that his betrayal didn't destroy me. It changed me, but it didn't destroy me. If you're listening to my story right now, maybe you're dealing with your own betrayal. Maybe someone you trusted has disappointed you. Maybe someone you loved has broken your heart. Maybe you're wondering if life will ever feel normal again. I can't promise the journey will be easy. It won't, but I can promise this. The people who betray you do not get to decide how your story ends. Only you do. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't getting even. It's rebuilding. It's healing. It's creating a life so full of peace that the people who hurt you become nothing more than distant memories. Because trust is precious. Love is precious. And when someone treats those gifts carelessly, they eventually lose access to them. Ryan lost mine forever. And in the end, that was a price no amount of money could ever repay. I lost a husband. But I found myself, and looking back now, I know exactly which one was worth keeping.